I was only a lieutenant when I first saw her, the UHS Atlas, humanity's first and only supercarrier. No one really understood what supercarrier meant until they laid eyes on her. She wasn't a ship, she was a moving continent, a steel titan hanging in the void. Her silhouette blotted out stars, casting a shadow on the alien observation platform where we stood. Even the translators struggled to keep up with the alien whispers around me. The Delvari, with their crystalline skin catching the starlight, murmured to each other in awe. The Thrwn, tall and coiled like living sculptures, hissed words that smelled of fear. I pressed my hand against the cold railing, feeling a jolt of pride I couldn't contain. Born on a mining colony where the sun never rose, I had seen ships, freighters, corvettes, even battleships, but nothing like this. The Atlas didn't move through space. She commanded it. The endless rows of launch bays and gun emplacements spoke a language everyone understood, no matter their species. When her engines fired for the first time, starlight itself seemed to bend around her, a ripple of energy that silenced even the aliens. Someone asked why humans would build something so massive, so openly dangerous. I didn't answer. Because the truth wasn't for them. The Atlas wasn't built to be understood. She was built to be feared. And standing there, under her shadow, I knew the galaxy would never be the same. The Atlas wasn't launched into a quiet galaxy, it was hurled straight into chaos. The Thrwn Empire, once proud and merciless, was collapsing under its own weight, tearing itself apart with border wars and rebellions. The Delvari clung to their fragile alliances like shards of glass in their hands. And out in the uncharted dark, something worse stirred, the Veil, a force that didn't conquer planets so much as erase them. Systems went silent without a distress call, without even wreckage to find. That's when humanity stepped in, not as saviors, not as peacekeepers, but as the only species stubborn enough to build something like the Atlas. I was part of the first diplomatic detachment to walk her decks alongside alien envoys. Diplomatic was a generous term for a squad of Marines with rifles slung over their shoulders and translators in their ears. The aliens shuffled through hangar bays so large they looked like cities, staring up at the rows of fighters and mechs like pilgrims in some temple of war. That night, in one of the observation lounges, I overheard a Delvari counselor whispering in her own tongue, thinking no human understood. The humans build a fortress, not for defense, but because they intend to own the battlefield. I didn't correct her. Because she wasn't wrong. The Atlas wasn't a shield, it was a statement. And the statement was clear. If the galaxy wanted to survive the Veil, it would have to do it under a human banner. The first time we saw the Veil, we didn't even understand what we were looking at. Their ships weren't ships, not in any way that made sense. They looked like jagged shadows that swallowed light, like broken glass glued together wrong, always shifting, always wrong. Some swore they heard whispers when they looked too long, as if the Veil wasn't just seen but felt, crawling into your mind. The Thrwn fired first. Of course they did. Their fleet, 1,000 strong, unleashed everything they had in a storm of plasma and rail fire. For 2 hours, the void burned, and then, nothing. The Thrwn ships were gone. Not destroyed, unmade star. Like they had never existed. The order came down to the Atlas before panic could take hold. Hold the line. I was on the flight deck when the alarm screamed, and the deck beneath me thrummed as squadrons launched. Fighters streaked out in waves, tiny sparks against the black. The Atlas's guns rotated, massive turrets locking onto the creeping silhouettes of the Veil. The Veil surged closer, their ships moving like ink in water. For a moment, I felt something primal in my chest, an instinct older than words: run. But the Atlas didn't run. Her engines flared like a dying sun, and the first volley roared out. The Veil reached for us that day. And for the first time, they didn't find prey. They found humans. Command of the Atlas was more than rank. It was a burden that could crush anyone who wasn't made of iron. Admiral Saran carried it like a storm, silent on the outside but dangerous if you stood too close. She wasn't the loud, fist-on-the-table kind of commander. She was calm in the way oceans are calm, that heavy stillness before the waves rise high enough to drown cities. I spent weeks on the bridge, watching her work. The map table glowed under her hands, a galaxy of light and data, and every point she touched meant lives, thousands, sometimes millions. She'd trace a finger along a line of Veil incursions, lips tight, eyes distant, and you could almost hear the calculations grinding in her head. Once, during a rare quiet moment, she stood alone at the viewport, the stars painting silver across her uniform. She whispered, almost like she was talking to herself, Asterisk, how many lives am I willing to trade for a chance to win? Asterisk. No one dared answer. We all knew the truth anyway. Every soul on the Atlas, Marines, pilots, engineers, even me, was already part of that trade. Every time the Admiral gave an order, the Atlas roared to life. Fighters launched. Cannons spun. Thousands moved because one voice told them to. And as heavy as that weight was, she never faltered. Because if she did, we'd all collapse with her. The Veil weren't static. Every battle they learned. Every skirmish they adapted. Weapons that worked once stopped working the next time. Tactics that crippled them one day were useless the day after. Whole fleets burned trying to keep up, but the Atlas, she endured. I'll never forget the battle over the shattered moon of This. The Veil unveiled something new, a weapon we'd never seen before. A gravity lance, they called it later, though that name didn't capture the horror of it. One shot, and a THR-1 cruiser folded in half like it was made of paper. The next shot hit us. I felt it through the deck, an impact that was more like the universe itself slamming a fist into the Atlas. Corridors tore open to the void. Whole sections of the forward hull melted into slag. Hundreds were lost in an instant. But the Atlas didn't stop. She didn't even slow down. Her railguns screamed defiance, her fighters kept launching, and through the smoke and fire, she turned her wounded bow back toward the enemy. It was in that moment the galaxy truly understood. The Atlas wasn't just metal and circuits. She was human will, hammered into steel, and human will doesn't break just because the universe decides it should. The Veil thought they'd crippled us. But all they did was teach the Atlas how to fight back harder. By then, alien fleets trailed us like shadows, not out of trust, but because they had no choice. The Atlas had become the center of every defense, every counterattack, the one thing holding the galaxy from falling completely into the dark. They watched her limp from battle to battle, scarred and scorched, patched with more alloy than original steel. She bled fire from her hull, yet she always turned to face the next threat. I caught fragments of their conversations, whispers in languages they thought we didn't understand. The Delvari counselors spoke in low, crystalline tones. Asterisk, humans are mad. They should retreat. They should surrender. And yet, asterisk, and yet we didn't. One night, I passed a THR-1 officer staring out a viewport, his serpentine form silhouetted against the stars. His voice was a hiss, almost reverent, when he muttered a single word, asterisk, unkillable. Asterisk. That's when I realized what they were really seeing. They'd met species stronger than us, faster than us, older than us. But they'd never met a species so impossibly, infuriatingly stubborn. The Atlas became a symbol, not just of power, but of defiance, the kind of defiance that drags whole civilizations behind it, whether they want to follow or not. And somewhere, deep down, they began to believe in her too. The Veil didn't shatter in some single, glorious battle. There was no cinematic moment where their flagship exploded and the war was suddenly over. No, it was slower than that, uglier. Years of grinding conflict, every victory costing blood and steel, every loss a reminder of how thin the line really was. And through it all, at the center of every stand, every desperate push, was the Atlas. I stayed with her as long as I could. Long enough to see decks rebuilt so many times they were a patchwork of human and alien design. Long enough to see her crew change, some faces never coming back, others arriving with eyes wide and terrified, only to become part of her heartbeat. When my time finally ended, when my uniform was more patch than fabric and my body carried more scars than I could count, I stepped off her decks for the last time. But she stayed. The Atlas became something more than a ship. To the galaxy, she was a myth whispered in war rooms and council halls. To humans, she was a promise that no matter how dark the stars became, we would never stop pushing back. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I can still hear her engines rumble, still feel the weight of her presence. The Atlas wasn't built just to fight a war. She was built to tell the stars something they'd never heard before. Humanity is here. And we are not leaving. Asterisk, asterisk.